Is Russia at war with NATO? It's the question echoing across Europe this week because what once felt unthinkable now looks dangerously possible.
A Russian military aircraft crosses into NATO airspace. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't turn away. Radar operators track it in real time. Speed, altitude, trajectory. Fighter jets are scrambled. Missile batteries go live. For several minutes, nothing happens. Then a decision is made. A missile leaves the rail. The aircraft disappears from radar. This is no longer a proxy war. This is no longer Ukraine. This is the moment where theory ends and escalation begins. For decades, NATO and Russia have lived inside a fragile balance. A balance built not on trust, but on fear, restraint, and red lines that everyone agreed not to cross. Today, those lines are thinner than they have ever been, and no one is entirely sure who will cross the next one, or why. For more than 3 years, the war in Ukraine has dominated headlines, budgets, and political agendas across the world. But beneath the daily updates lies a far more dangerous question, not whether Ukraine will win or lose, but whether the war stays contained. Because from the very beginning, the conflict was never just about Ukraine. It was about the rules of power in Europe, about NATO's credibility, about Russia's willingness to accept limits, and above all, about avoiding a direct war between nuclear-armed blocs. That restraint has held so far. But holding is not the same as stable. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in early 2022, NATO faced an immediate dilemma: intervene directly and risk global war, or support Ukraine indirectly and hope deterrence would hold. NATO chose the second path. Weapons flowed in, first anti-tank missiles, then artillery, then advanced air defense, then long-range strike systems. Intelligence flowed. Training flowed. Money flowed. What did not flow were NATO combat troops. That absence was intentional. It created a buffer, a space where Ukraine could fight and Russia could bleed without forcing NATO and Moscow into direct combat. For a time, the system worked. But war is not static. As months turned into years, the boundaries blurred. Weapons once considered unthinkable became routine. Strikes once considered escalatory became normalized. Warnings were issued, and then quietly ignored. Each time a red line was crossed without consequence, something subtle changed, not in headlines, but in calculations. A red line, in military strategy, is not a promise. It's a signal. It tells an adversary where restraint ends and response begins. Russia has declared many red lines since the war began. No NATO troops in Ukraine, no NATO attacks on Russian forces, no permanent NATO missile deployments near Russian borders. NATO has declared one primary red line: an attack on any NATO member's territory. That line is backed by Article 5, the collective defense clause that binds 32 countries into a single security commitment. It sounds simple, but it is the most dangerous sentence in modern geopolitics. Because once invoked, it forces action, not debate. For most of the war, both sides worked carefully around these boundaries. Russia avoided striking NATO territory directly. NATO avoided deploying troops into Ukraine. Instead, conflict moved into gray zones: cyber attacks, disinformation, sabotage, political interference. These actions are deniable, ambiguous, hard to attribute. They allow pressure without triggering formal war. But gray zones are unstable by nature. They reward risk-taking, and they punish hesitation. By 2024, the tempo changed. Russia began increasing military pressure along NATO's eastern flank, not invasions, provocations, aircraft flying dangerously close to NATO airspace, naval vessels maneuvering aggressively in the Baltic and Black Seas, electronic jamming near borders. Each incident forced NATO to respond, scramble jets, issue warnings, demonstrate readiness. Most encounters ended quietly, but each one carried the same risk. All it takes is one miscalculation, one pilot who doesn't turn away, one radar operator who misreads intent, one commander who assumes the worst. That is how escalation begins, not with orders from the top, but with moments at the edge. Airspace is the most dangerous arena in this confrontation because it compresses time. A violation lasts seconds. A decision takes moments. A missile travels faster than thought. In late 2025, that compression became reality. Russian aircraft entered NATO airspace during a period of heightened tension. NATO air defenses engaged. This was not symbolic. This was not a warning shot. A Russian aircraft was shot down. The incident was contained, barely. Diplomatic channels went silent. Military readiness levels rose. No one celebrated. Because everyone understood what had happened. For the first time since the Cold War, NATO and Russia had exchanged direct fire. The red line had not vanished, but it had been crossed. And once crossed, it could be crossed again. This is where the danger accelerates. Modern militaries do not operate at human speed. They operate at machine speed. Early warning systems process data in real time. Command and control networks rely on automation. Artificial intelligence filters threats before humans even see them. This increases efficiency, but it also increases risk. Because machines do not understand context, they understand parameters. A cyber intrusion can look like a first strike. Electronic jamming can look like preparation for attack. A routine exercise can look like mobilization. In such an environment, restraint depends on perfect information. And perfect information does not exist. History is full of moments when catastrophe was avoided by chance. A Soviet officer who chose not to report a false missile alert, a NATO exercise misinterpreted by Moscow as preparation for war, a radar glitch that nearly triggered retaliation. During the Cold War, leaders had minutes, sometimes hours, to verify. Today, they may have seconds, and seconds are not enough for diplomacy. The psychological pressure on decision-makers is immense. Every move is scrutinized, every pause interpreted, every concession framed as weakness. Leaders are not just managing adversaries, they are managing domestic politics. Publics demand strength, allies demand reassurance, opponents test limits. In such an environment, backing down is politically costly. Escalation, paradoxically, can feel safer than restraint. A direct NATO-Russia war would not begin with a massive invasion. It would begin with something small, an airspace incident, a naval collision, a cyber attack causing civilian casualties. At first, responses would be measured, targeted strikes, limited engagements, carefully worded statements. But war has momentum. Once blood is shed directly, pressure builds to respond harder. Each side would claim deterrence requires strength. Each escalation would be framed as defensive. This is how limited wars become unlimited. The consequences would extend far beyond the battlefield. Modern war targets systems, not just soldiers, power grids, ports, undersea cables, satellites. Europe's infrastructure is deeply interconnected. A disruption in one place cascades across borders. Energy markets would spike, supply chains would fracture, financial markets would react violently. This would not mean global collapse, but it would mean global shock, the kind that reshapes politics for decades. Civilian populations would feel the impact almost immediately. Energy shortages, inflation, emergency laws, restrictions justified by security. Fear would spread faster than facts, and fear is a political force. It changes elections, it hardens attitudes, it narrows options. Once societies shift into wartime psychology, stepping back becomes harder. This is why red lines matter, not because they guarantee peace, but because they create pause. They force leaders to consider consequences before acting. The danger today is not that red lines no longer exist. It's that they are becoming ambiguous, tested, reinterpreted, normalized as obstacles rather than boundaries. There are several scenarios analysts quietly worry about. One is the Baltic states, small, strategically exposed, deeply integrated into NATO. A hybrid attack, cyber sabotage combined with unrest, could blur the line between internal instability and external aggression. At what point does NATO respond militarily? Another scenario involves the Black Sea. Naval encounters are frequent, rules of engagement are tight, one collision, one exchange of fire, and suddenly, escalation is underway. The most dangerous scenario, however, is the simplest. An accident. No strategy. No grand plan. Just a chain of assumptions that move faster than diplomacy. None of this means war is inevitable. It is not. Both NATO and Russia understand the stakes. Both benefit, in different ways, from avoiding direct confrontation. Deterrence still works, for now. But deterrence is not a shield, it is a balance, and balances require constant adjustment. The question facing the world today is not whether red lines can be crossed, they already have been. The question is whether leaders still know how to stop once they are. Because history shows that wars rarely begin with a single dramatic decision. They begin with moments when caution gives way to momentum, when signaling fails, when fear outruns reason. We are living inside such moments now. The outcome is not predetermined, but the margin for error is shrinking. And in a system built on restraint, the most dangerous thing of all is assuming it will always hold.